Hi you guys, welcome back to my channel. I am Funky Like Feathers, and today I'm going to give you some of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to editing a manuscript. So editing is extremely important because we are the editors are kind of the people who just make what it is that you want to put out into the world really good, right? So we try to kind of polish up what it is that you sent us and make sure that the message you want to give is exactly the message that is getting to your readers, whether it's for business purposes in an article or on your website, or if we're dealing with manuscripts and fictional stories. Now, when it comes to editing these manuscripts and, different kinds of articles, there are kind of my top 3 things that I see in manuscripts that are just the most common mistakes made and can really be corrected easily. So here are my top 3 pet peeves when it comes to editing a manuscript. Okay, so I don't think that the first one is any real shocker. It's the difference between showing and telling, right? So we get this a lot of times when a writer is telling the reader about something happening. You're telling us that someone does not feel well. You're telling us that the character is excited, right? We don't need to be told what their emotional state is or, that they're having a physical feeling that is different. We really want to see it. So you need to show us that that is what the character is going through. So instead of saying, oh, the character doesn't feel well, say the character had a rumbling in her stomach that caused her to, choke back a convulsion or make it gritty. If someone is nervous, don't tell us that they're nervous. Tell us that they're wringing their fingers. Tell us that they're picking at their nails. We want to see a mannerism that showcases that emotion. Same kind of thing when we are dealing with how a character is thinking about things. So we want those sensory bits of information that we don't really get anywhere else. This is super important for really bringing that reader into the scene. Now, my second pet peeve is an overuse of pronouns. And I see this in a lot of manuscripts, especially because, as the writers, it's very easy to get wrapped up in a conversation, especially that's happening between multiple characters. Even when there's only 2 characters in the room, you still need to reference back to that character's name because it's not always a seasoned reader who's in the middle of that scene. So I kind of explain this to people as well as, there are times where someone will pull your book off of a shelf, open it to a random page, and they want to kind of see if this is a story they can easily get into or if they're interested in it. And oftentimes, as editors, we may ask for a chapter from the middle of your manuscript to edit. So we haven't read any of the previous story. We have no idea really who these characters are, but we want to see who they are based on how you write them in this scene. So this is why every single scene and every single chapter is so important, because you never know where that reader is coming into the story. Or if they were reading, had to put the book down, and they're coming back to it, they want to sink into that scene just as much as they did from page 1. We really want to kind of limit and pay attention to how often we use certain pronouns. In an entire paragraph, if it's all about she, her, them, I have no clue who we're talking about again. And especially because while we're editing, we are paying attention to so many aspects of your writing. It's very easy to get lost in a situation of who we're talking about. So usually kind of my rule of thumb is that if your paragraph has, about 4 sentences in it, we should have the character's name at least once in there. That's usually kind of my general rule of thumb. Remind us who it is that you're talking about so that we don't get lost in all of the descriptions going on. Now, while we're talking about what the characters are saying and doing, it also comes down to adding action into the dialogue tags. So no matter how you feel about the word said, if you think said is dead, if you don't like adding, dialogue tags, I understand that to a certain extent. However, we do still need to keep movement in the scene. So what we don't want is kind of what I refer to as Furbies in a dark room. So you pretty much, this is going to show how old I am, but there was a toy called a Furby, and you could turn it on and literally take two Furbies, put them down, and they would end up talking to each other, right? And they keep talking no matter what. What we end up getting without action in dialogue tags is we get those Furbies in a dark room. We forget where they are. We forget what the setting is. We forget what mannerisms a character is utilizing while saying different phrases. Especially when there's certain phrases where, you know, we all know the kind of physical response you would have while telling someone, oh, don't worry about it. Did you see my hand? Don't worry about it. We brush it off or wave it off, or, you know, there are certain things that we can do to explain a little bit more about how the character is reacting in a situation. So that way you don't get just two people saying, yes, I would like to go there. Oh, don't worry about it. We'll be there tomorrow. That's okay. I really feel like I need to go today. See how it just kind of brings down and kind of makes a conversation more monotone if you don't introduce mannerisms or some kind of description about how someone is saying something. That kind of leaves us with two characters just standing, not interacting with the scenery, not interacting with each other, and we get a very flat conversation. So those are kind of my top 3 things that I see in a lot of manuscripts. Editing funky here, no pun intended. I'm actually going to give you one bonus thing that does actually stand out in my mind quite often when I'm reading manuscripts. It is the magical object. Now, what do I mean by magical objects? These are the things that magically disappear or magically appear or change without the audience being shown or told that something has happened to this item. Right, so this often happens with cups that people are holding, or pens, or a door that's left open. You know, it's things that slip through the cracks as you're describing a scene, and suddenly a character has a cup in their hand that never existed in the scene before that. Or they go from holding like a glass of wine, and then suddenly they're not holding it anymore because they're using both hands to accomplish a task. So those kinds of things, definitely look out for. Magical objects. This really comes down to just making that dialogue amazing. Dialogue is extremely important when it comes to really showcasing personalities of characters and showing how well connected they are, and connecting them not just with each other, but also, like I said, with the setting and the scene. So we want to see their interactions, because otherwise it is just, it flattens out the story by not showing the dimensions and the dynamics between each other, within themselves, and within the world, with the world around them. So those are some things to keep in mind. Make sure that you are going through your manuscript, check for these kinds of things, and once you go through it and you think it's ready, send it to an editor so you've got a professional and set of eyes on your manuscript. You need someone who is not there with you every step of the way. So a lot of times we have critique groups and everything. Critique groups are amazing. You want to make sure that you've got someone who has not been there for every part of your story to really look at it, because they are full on a third party and they can look at it unbiased and go, this was amazingly well done. This brought me into the scene. I love how your character comes off like this. So really make sure that you've got an editor looking at your work, because I mean, I could do an entire video just on the importance of getting an editor to read your stuff. Keep writing those manuscripts, keep writing your stories. We all want to read them, and just keep those things in mind as you're going through it. I'll see you guys in the next video.